Hey everyone, it's Leandra at the Kentucky facility for New Vocations Racehorse Adoption Program, and with me today is a brand new horse here. Her name is Gesture, and she just came to us, so she's pretty fresh off the trailer. And for our stable pass behind the scenes video today, we're going to walk you through what we do for the intake process for these guys who are brand new. So right off the bat, right off the bat, we have an intake form. This helps us guide us through the process so that we make sure that we cover all the bases. It's pretty easy to miss something in the chaos of everything. So at this point, Gesture has had time to just decompress in her stall. There's water there and hay. She can just relax, get used to the environment, meet her neighbors, and just kind of figure out where she is, and then we will do things like take an intake picture, which helps us behind the scenes, just within the organization, to identify the horses if ever there was a question of which horse was which comes in handy when you have a lot of, for example, bay geldings who look exactly the same in a field. You can make sure that you know which one. So we make sure to note any markings like the star that she's got on her head here, or the socks in the back. So those white markings on her feet, those are socks. And then Julie has a couple of the tools that we will also use in the process. And also just a short note on, you might see her fidgeting a little bit, or like when she pushed my hand off of her nose. It is absolutely normal for horses to be a little anxious their first day. We don't take any of that sort of information that we get from them about their personality without a grain of salt, especially in the first week or two as they're adjusting. They're going to change a lot, and we also expect the same sort of consideration from adopters when they're moving to a new home, that this is a totally new process for them. And we actually make a note of that in the go home folders when a horse gets adopted, that they shouldn't be ridden in the first week. They really should just have this time to get used to the new space. So same sort of thing, the transition period for them. And so, for example, she acted a little bit aloof when I first walked into the stall, and then I just kind of was patient and stuck with her, and she's extremely kind. So I think her default personality is extremely kind, but that sort of standoffish behavior we can expect, just like you wouldn't go up to a complete stranger and act like you've been family for your entire lives. So they are, of course, going to need time to adjust as well. So I can take any part of this. I'll take this. This is a microchip scanner. So a lot of the horses are, at this point, required to be microchipped. Tattooing is becoming a thing of the past. Many of the thoroughbreds, or all of them before, if they were registered, would need to get a lip tattoo. So now they're just being microchipped, and then their registration is attached to that microchip. So they're very simple to use. They'll pick up on a microchip pretty quickly once I have it reading. And generally they're somewhere in their neck in that lower third, but it can be a little bit different. You see it picked up on something right away. So we make note of that in the paperwork for her. I'll shove this in my pocket here. And we have a very great, accurate tool that can seem very scary to horses, so we're always cognizant of that, but this is how we measure the horses. So we don't just eyeball their height, we actually have a measuring stick that you can see, the 15, 16, those big numbers are in hands, and then there are 4 inches in a hand, so that you have the different considerations in between, and they're measured to their withers, the top point in their withers, which is right here. And so we usually will cover their eye or try to distract them, and she's being very brave. You can see there's a level on top here. So we've already sticked her. We'll just do it again, and you try to just sort of touch the hairs, make sure this is generally lined up. And then step it away so that it's not scary. So she is 16.1½, which puts us in between 16.1 and 16.2. So that's her height. We make note of that. Other things that we will look for are things like their general body condition. She's a perfect example of what we call a race fit horse, which might for other disciplines be a little on the skinny side, so kind of streamlined appearance. And so there is a standardized sort of tool that's used to measure body score, and she would be a 4 out of 9 on this. She is shod on all 4 feet, so that's something we make note of. And Allie, actually, I'm going to give this to you, so I don't have one more thing in my hand. We'll go over to look. She has racing plates on. So racing plates are made of aluminum, and they have a toe grab. So it's kind of like cleats. If you have had to wear cleats for any sort of sport, there's a little grab, and that can help to gain traction, sort of a pull motion. It helps them to, just like you would need in a soccer field, for example, a little extra stick to your footing. We also checked her teeth. It's really easy to do, just as, without the dental tools. What you'll do is sort of run your fingers up the side of their mouths. Obviously, take caution because you can get some fingers bit, and it feels like she was just done. You can only feel the premolars in using that technique, but if their premolars are bad, chances are the rest of it's pretty bad. In her case, you can actually feel that they feel like they were just done, that she was just floated. So that would probably apply to all of it. But of course, if you ended up having issues where she was dropping grain or losing weight, you could always have them rechecked by a professional. Her general attitude, like I say, we take notes of, but we always sort of give them some leeway. This is not like a final assessment. Obviously, this is just them coming in, and it's going to help us to see a baseline. And then what we'll generally do is jog the horses. So she has, like I said, she's got shoes on all 4. It's important to note we had another horse come in who was barefoot, so if he was a little footsore, then we would take that into consideration. But one of the things that we noted when looking at her is it looks like she's got what we call an osselet, which is a pretty common racetrack injury. It's calcification around a joint that generally, once it's cold and set, as long as it doesn't impede with movement, that, yeah. I just have this. So this ankle that looks big, it's probably an osselet. So we can always have that examined if it becomes an issue, but it's a pretty common racing thing that we'll see, because what the joint will do is it lays down bone around, not always, of course, but it will calcify, and it's the body trying to strengthen a point of potential weakness, basically, is the best way of putting it. So they'll put down calcium deposits to try to strengthen the joint, especially in a career like racing, where they're physically exerting themselves to the absolute limit, that they could have like a micro fracture that doesn't show up in x-rays, but then the body just tries to strengthen that joint, and it does that by laying down calcium deposits, so bone. So again, we don't always know exactly why it happens. We just see it a lot, and oftentimes, as long as it is what we call cold and set, and it's not causing, if there's not like a chip in there or something else, then generally it just ends up being a cosmetic blemish and not anything of great concern, except for maybe aesthetics, if people are really concerned with that. One other thing to note here, just because we see it a lot too, is you can see that there's some pin firing. So these dots right here, she has them on both sides, so we'll make note of that. And that might mean that she could have had a high splint at some point, or they suspected that she would develop a splint, but there's a lot of different sort of mentalities to the practice, but unless she had a lameness associated with it, it's generally just something, again, that is cosmetic. So let's do a baseline jog with her and just see how she does. It's beneficial to have a hard aisleway, because then you can hear the sound of them tracking. Rambo likes to sometimes guide this process too. Oh, he's gone. And as she's jogging, we can also make note of her bravery levels as she goes through sort of new territory, and she doesn't seem to be greatly impacted. And with her, something that we made note of was that she seems like she might have a slight lameness. So something that we'll check out with our vets. It might be associated with that osselet, like I said, because we don't really know what it is at that point, but at least we have baseline notes so that we can look into that if that becomes problematic. But right now, her only job is to basically relax, get to know her surroundings. We'll start her in the round pen, because chances are she hasn't been in a turnout since she's come right from the track. So we'll start her in the round pens, where she can have a controlled atmosphere, get used to the space again, get used to being by herself at Liberty, just in a smaller space. And that in general is that's a great example of how we do intake for some of these new horses. So again, if you missed it, this is Gesture. That's with a G. Gesture is a filly standing at 16.5. She's 4 years old, and she just came here into our training program here in Kentucky. So be on the lookout for more from her. Thanks so much for joining us today on this Sable Pass behind the scenes look at how we do intake for new horses coming into our program.